coach. Hey, Joe, I got a lot of work to do, dog.
Well, let's go to somebody who can help us, because we certainly will need some help when it comes to the Red Sox this season. It is from The Athletic. It is our very own Jen McCaffrey joining us on Foster's End of the Chat. And Jen, you just heard Garrett Crochet. He's added a splitter to the mix this year. Time and tempo. What'd you see, or what did you think of some of his comments, I guess, today regarding on some of the things he's working on this spring training?
Yeah, you guys just kind of said it there. This is all about sort of the early part of spring is all about kind of like tinkering with new things, tinkering with that splitter and just trying to like refine it in games that don't matter, right? Obviously everybody wants the Red Sox to do well against the Yankees, but in spring training it really is just sort of about pitch by pitch, and like he said, just getting back out there on the mound and working on things so that when the games do matter, he's, at top-notch form. So, obviously not the results that he probably wanted today, but I think he just is sort of just working through some of those kinks early on and making sure that the pitches are in a good spot once he's ready to go at the end of camp.
Yeah, one guy who has had a pretty good camp and a very good WBC so far is Roman Anthony. What do you expect to see from him this season? Do you think that he could potentially be an all-star this year?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think All-Star is almost the floor for him. I think people are talking about him in the MVP conversation. That's how, highly touted this guy is, and I think the sky's the limit here. I just wrote a story on The Athletic, actually came out today, just about his own expectations for himself. And unsurprisingly, he's just, he worked the off season, obviously coming back from the oblique injury, but also just said he's working as if he's not even a major leaguer yet, and really just trying to, continuing to hone in on every aspect of his game. He actually talked a lot about his defense and how seeing Wilyer Abreu and Ceddanne Rafaela win Gold Gloves sort of really has motivated him even more to, elevate his defensive game. So, down in camp, you'll see him doing extra work with Kyle Hudson, the outfielder's coach, just taking kind of like flips over his shoulder and, balancing on one leg and trying to just really like refine the very little details that, even a guy as talented as him just really wants to get that much better. And then offensively, obviously, they're really hoping that he kind of takes that next step forward. You saw a glimpse of what he was able to do in those 70 games last year with what was it, 850 or so OPS, and then of course the injury in September. But really, honestly, I think the sky's the limit for him, and he is going to be hitting at the top of the order for them. They're putting high expectations on him, and I think he's ready to fill those shoes.
Jen, I want to talk about the sky, because you said the sky's the limit. Let's go there. I mean, obviously, we see the investment from the Red Sox with him already under contract. Lucy brought up the WBC. We're all expecting big things from him there. We've seen the birth of the Roman Empire here in town, but when I say let's talk about the sky, what is the sky for this kid? Are we talking now where this is like a coming out party? Maybe the WBC is nationally, everyone starts to say this kid in Boston could be the future of the game. Like what's sort of, let's zoom out and look at big picture for Roman Anthony. What do you see for him?
Yeah, 100%. I think being, in a lineup in the WBC that's among all the stars, the entire league's attention, the entire world's attention, for the sport is sort of on that team. And just the fact that he's going to be playing alongside those guys, soaking up their knowledge and really on that stage, their first exhibition game on Tuesday hits the 2-run homer in the 6th. So I think people, anybody that was sort of underrating him kind of sees that he can play with these guys. He's the youngest guy in the roster by 2 years. I think Paul Skenes is the next youngest guy. So he's young and obviously extremely talented, and in kind of, showing that he can match those guys that are, MVP winners, World Series winners, obviously perennial all-stars in that lineup. And he's, hitting 7th and starting in left field.
Jen, Alex Cora has mentioned that he wants Anthony to lead off, and mentioned Trevor Story and Jiren Duran potentially being in the 3-hole. I think there's room for him to grow in the 3-hole. He's been a leadoff hitter and he's batted at the bottom of the lineup. But what kind of changes do you think he did this offseason, and why do they believe he could be their number 3 hitter?
Yeah, he's looked good this camp. He's kind of come out swinging, had some, some good at-bats. Obviously, it's small sample sizes. You're not gleaning too much from these early parts of camp, and he's now with Team Mexico for the WBC, so we haven't seen him in a few days. But really, I think, they're just looking to kind of get back to that 2024 season. They had that breakout season that he had where he was just such a dynamic player, and almost unfair for, the expectation to assume he was going to be like that in 2025. And 25 wasn't even really a bad year by any means. It was just so good in 24 that I think, they're really just hoping he kind of relaxes a little bit into the role, takes the pressure off himself. That's obviously something he's always dealt with, and just sort of play his game. He's one of the more veteran guys on this team, which is kind of weird to say, just given that Bregman's gone and, Ref Snyder's gone. And so Trevor Story at the start of camp said that he's going to really be relying on Duran to kind of be a voice for the team. You've got Wilson Contreras, who's a veteran, but he's also new to Boston. So Duran's been around for a while, and I think that's going to be another thing that he can lean on as just being this sort of older presence, even though he's not even, old. 29 is not old, but that he can kind of lean into that and be kind of a voice among the guys here. So offensively, yeah, I think just really just step his game up that much more, using that speed that he has out of the box, and kind of, those hustle doubles that we always, saw in 24 and somewhat in 25, turning singles into doubles, and just speed and power, and kind of really leaning into that, I think will help him elevate his game this year.
Yeah, and looking at the rest of the outfield. So the Red Sox posted this photo collage on Instagram today, taking a look at the outfield, and Christian Campbell was included in this photo collage. Where do you think he fits in on this team? Is it in the outfield somehow with this kind of DHing outfield mix that Cora is going to have to put together this year?
At this moment in time, in early March, I do think he starts the year in AAA in the outfield. He's only really getting outfield reps throughout camp. They really just want him to focus on fixing his swing, kind of refining how, he goes about his work in the batter's box. All offseason, that was something he really focused on. I wrote about that too in The Athletic a few days ago, of just how he kind of really peeled back everything and rebuilt his swing. He was staring in a mirror for the first month of the offseason to try to figure out, changes to make in his swing. He was looking at Vlad Guerrero Jr. and even Bregman's swing, and kind of trying to really bring his hands down. So they really wanted him to focus on the offensive side of things, instead of, giving him so many, being this super utility guy that he sort of was last year, bouncing between second and the outfield. They decided to just stick him in the outfield. Now, the problem, as I was saying, is, the outfield is pretty crowded, especially at the big league level. You've also got Masataka Yoshida in the mix there that they keep saying they want to get outfield reps for, just because of the situation they're in with him. So Campbell, at this point, early in camp, doesn't seem to have a spot on the big league roster. That doesn't mean he can't push for one. That doesn't mean he can't push for a bench spot of some sort, and make things interesting. Obviously, injuries crop up too. So I think he'd be the first line of defense if one of those guys went down. But as of right now, their outfield's so strong that there's not really a hole unless someone gets hurt or they do make a trade.
Yeah, Jen, I was hoping it worked at second base for the kid. It doesn't appear as though that's going to be the case. I want to ask you about pitching and offense. Here's what I mean. You famously now have said the Red Sox have the best pitching rotation in all of baseball. I happen to agree with you, although it's hard to say anyone has the best anything other than the Dodgers, right? But I think the Red Sox are right there. Here's where I'm at, though, and I'm curious if you feel the same way. I've sat here all off season complaining and saying that they're too pitch heavy. I don't think they did enough this offseason in terms of the bats. Do you see it that way? Are you concerned with the offense like I am? Or do you think this is a well-balanced team?
I think there's always some level of concern because, again, if one or two of these guys gets hurt, then, what's your next line of defense? So you're obviously thinking you're going to get a lot out of Wilson Contreras, but one injury that crops up, who's the middle of your order bat? Same thing with Anthony. He's obviously entering his first full season. He's never played a full season in the majors. And I, was hyping him up earlier, but there's also, room for growth there too. So I think their plan right now really hinges on all these guys staying healthy, all these guys performing to their top level expectations. Even Trevor Story, who was so productive last year after May, from May through the end of the year, was one of the best hitters in baseball. are you going to get that a second year in a row? Like, can he level up that game a second year in a row? So I think, the plan for pitching and defense, and then sort of this this offense that doesn't have, a true power hitter, if you will, really hinges on the fact that everything has to go right and everybody has to stay healthy. And how often does that happen? So, yeah, I think there are some questions. I think rightfully so. People should kind of question where the offense is going to come from consistently. On the flip side, I do think that this could be a team that surprises people and, uses that wall in Fenway and left to just their advantage. The pull side power from Contreras is real. Even Durbin, they feel like he's going to be able to use the wall too. So, that again is everything going well, and things don't always go well, as we know. So there's potential there, but yes, I do think that there could be more. There probably should have been more done this winter to add to the offense, but they're at where they're at right now. So they're going in the season the way they are here.
So ESPN released a list of the top 100 baseball players. Right now, Crochet was at number 8 of all baseball players. Then you have Roman at 33, you have Jiren at 67, Ranger Suarez 85, Ceddanne Rafaela 88, and Aroldis Chapman 93. Is this where you would place them as well? And how, I would say great is it, but what do you think of the fact that there are so many Red Sox players on this list?
Yeah, I mean, that just kind of listening to some of those, rankings, I think that's probably where I would put some of those guys. I think Crochet is definitely one of the top pitchers in the league. I mean, he finished second in the American League, Cy Young last year to Tarek Skubal. We've talked obviously about Roman, and Duran is probably, if you're looking at the roster, the third best player on this roster. So I do think that pretty much tracks. There's no aside from maybe Crochet, and you can talk about Anthony being on the rise, and there's no true superstars on the team, right? And so I think that's something that people have looked to as, this is a different looking Red Sox team. But if you actually kind of peel back some of the numbers and look at some of the kind of under the hood numbers, it is a pretty interesting and talented team. It just, as I was saying earlier, everyone has to stay healthy, perform to their expectations, and kind of go in that direction. So, I do think that pretty much tracks. It's not super surprising, but at the same time, I think people like to look at Red Sox teams having David Ortiz, Manny Ramirez, Dustin Pedroia, Mookie Betts, Xander Bogaerts, those kind of big name players, and this team isn't quite that yet, and maybe they'll surprise some people.
All right, well, Jen, appreciate you always taking the time to join us here. She's from The Athletic. Subscribe. I'm a subscriber, and I'll be following all season long. Jen, appreciate the time. We get real baseball tonight, too, with the World Baseball Classic. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right, it's Jen McCaffrey. Guys, would you rather? Would you rather?
Would you rather?
I like a little of that. We'll do more. Coming up next here on Nesson's Boston's Enter the Chat.